Monica Sanders, Senior Fellow at the Tulane University Disaster Resilience Leadership Academy, joins us here with some helpful tips on how to prepare for a disaster, because September, after all, is National Preparedness Month. So, Monica, welcome to the show, and we'll start with what items you need for your disaster preparedness kits. I know it's changing and evolving with those kits now. We've got some really helpful items you can share with us.
Yeah, absolutely. I keep two, one to evacuate and one in case I need to shelter in place. And you're right, it is evolving because of the pandemic. So keep extra masks on hand. Also, you see I have it behind me, Clorox disinfecting wipes and Clorox bleach, because you want to keep those surfaces clean and disinfected, especially if you have to go to a shelter or hotel, a place that you don't really know. You want to stay safe in that way. And then also there's the things we need for natural disaster season. 2 to 3 days of food and water, 2 to 3 days change of clothes, some cash on hand, because when the power goes out, the ATM and Apple Pay go out as well. You want to make sure your car is gassed up and that you have a reunification plan. I recommend, especially people in hurricane-prone zones like where you are and where I am, to call somebody outside of the storm zone so they know where you are in case you lose cell phone signals or if you're unable to connect with them in a certain amount of time. So have a kit, but also have a communications plan.
Yeah, so for sure, Monica. So here in Northeast Florida, South Georgia, we say know your zone. Know if you're in an at-risk area, okay? Know if you're in a flood zone. So for those folks, what can they do to better prepare?
I love that advice of know your zone. I went to college in Miami, so I still remember my South Florida zone. But the thing about it is if you live in an at-risk area, you just have to stay prepared. They should be signed up for your app and paying attention to your website, because there's nothing better than local news to know what's going on around you. Keep both those preparedness kits that I just mentioned on hand. Store it somewhere in your house or your car just in case. And also keep that communications plan. Everyone in the family should know where to go and where to get reconnected in case something happens. And then also make sure that you are monitoring meteorologists and monitoring weather systems around you, because at-risk zones, a lot of natural disaster, natural hazard risk is just a way of life for some of us. So we have preparedness season, but then we should just always be prepared.
Right, and the one thing we say, heed the warning. Please heed the warning. So how do folks prepare for evacuations? I mean, it's a reality of life. I know folks in Nocatee, that's their biggest fear, but how do they prepare for the evacuations and heed that warning effectively?
So we talked about changing times. One of the things I and my colleagues at the Resilience Leadership Academy say is, in addition to knowing your zone and knowing what's going on around you, prepare early and, move at least, if it's a big storm like some of these hurricanes that we've been seeing, be prepared to go at least 250 miles outside of the danger zone of the storm. Then the other piece of it is know who you're going with, because we're still dealing with a public health emergency. So either with your immediate family, or if you've been keeping a social bubble or a social circle, go with those folks. Make sure you have a plan for where you're going to go. We might be lacking shelter space because of social distancing, or just because sometimes the number of people who need to evacuate. The same things with hotels or friends or family. Also, have a reunification plan. I have a large family, so sometimes we're not all in one car. In case you get separated on the highway or in transit, make sure you have a point where you can get back together. Again, in case you don't have cell phone service, you know where you're going to reunify with your friends and family members in case you have to evacuate. One other thing I keep a good old-fashioned map on hand, because just sometimes when an emergency, GPS doesn't work. So make sure you know who you're going with, you know how you're going to get there, and that you really know where you're going to go. Both in terms of the place you're going and how you're going to get there, and have a reunification plan.
Yeah, we got to go over those little things, and they add up. So a lot of little things, but if you're prepared, we can get through this. Now, we talked about preparing. What about the aftermath of the storm after cleanup? And that can be just as important, right?
Cleanup is incredibly important. So I'm going to say two things repeatedly in this answer. Be safe and disinfect, because we're dealing with two big issues at one time if there's been a storm. So first thing, make sure the place that you're going back to is safe. Meaning, if you're going back into a place that's just had a hurricane or a big event, make sure it's actually safe to return. And then if you're in your neighborhood, watch out for down power lines and trees and standing water and all those kinds of things before you decide to clean up. For us, particularly in places like Florida or Louisiana, where I'm from, or Virginia, where I'm living, mold and mildew are a real concern. The best thing to deal with that is a bleach and water mixture. So you'll want to do some early cleaning with detergent, but then also come behind it with that Clorox disinfecting bleach and some water and clean up any mold or mildew and let it dry so that you prevent any of the after effects from doing that. When you're cleaning, be safe. Make sure you're wearing long sleeves, that you have gloves on, that you have your mask on, so that you are cutting down on the risk of any skin or nasal passage irritation from anything that may be in the house, as well as the cleaning solutions. And then also, because it's hot, take breaks, drink water, make sure that the place where you're cleaning is well ventilated. And if you do have electricity, turn the fan on, turn the AC on while you're doing the cleanup. And just be careful and pay attention to what you're doing when you go back to a place that's been impacted by a natural disaster.
All right, thanks so much, Monica Sanders, for being on our show. So remember, September, it's all about being prepared. And where can folks go for more information?
So for more information, the first stop they're going to do is check your website and pay attention to your app. Local news is the best news. For information about these mixtures, it's Clorox.com. And then for general preparedness tips, go to ready.gov. There's plenty of national preparedness tips on there from FEMA. So your website, Clorox, ready.gov is where they should go.
All right, thanks once again. And of course, for another look at this segment, head to firstcoastliving.net later today.